In the year 612 BC, the great city of Nineveh fell, the once mighty capital of the Assyrian Empire. A metropolis of unparalleled grandeur was reduced to smoldering ruins. As the flames consumed the royal palaces and great temples, millennia of history and culture went up in smoke. The fall of Nineveh marked the end of Assyrian dominance in the ancient Near East, a power that had shaped the region for centuries. But who were these Assyrians? How did they rise to such heights of power? And what led to their dramatic fall? Our journey begins not in the dusty ruins of ancient Mesopotamia, but in the halls of the British Museum in London. Colossal winged bulls with human heads stand guard over galleries filled with intricate stone reliefs. These artifacts, excavated in the 19th century, offer us a window into a lost world, a world of mighty kings, fearsome warriors, and awe-inspiring cities. As we stand before these relics, we can almost hear the echoes of a civilization long gone. The clash of bronze swords, the thundering hooves of war chariots, the chants of priests in towering ziggurats. All these sounds have long since faded into silence. But through the painstaking work of archaeologists, historians, and linguists, we can begin to piece together the story of the Assyrian Empire. This is a tale that spans nearly 2 millennia. From humble beginnings on the banks of the Tigris River to the creation of one of the ancient world's most extensive empires. The story of the Assyrians begins in the land known to the ancients as Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers. This fertile region, nourished by the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, has long been considered the cradle of civilization. It was here, in the 4th millennium BC, that the first cities arose, writing was invented, and the foundations of organized society were laid. The landscape of Mesopotamia is one of stark contrasts. In the north, the land is hilly and receives enough rainfall for agriculture. But as we move south, the terrain flattens out into a vast alluvial plain. Here, the rivers are the key to life, their annual floods bringing precious water and silt to an otherwise arid land. It was in this northern region, on the west bank of the Tigris, that the city of Assur was founded. The exact date of its founding is lost to time, but archaeological evidence suggests it was already a significant settlement by 2600 BC. Named after its patron deity, Assur, the city would become the heart of Assyrian civilization. In these early days, Assur was just one of many city-states dotting the Mesopotamian landscape. To the south lay the great Sumerian cities like Ur and Uruk, already ancient by the time Assur was rising to prominence. To the north and east were the mountains of Anatolia and the Iranian plateau, home to various tribal peoples who would alternately trade with and raid the lowland cities. Life in early Assur would have been focused on survival and trade. The city's location on the Tigris made it an important stop on trade routes connecting Anatolia, Syria, and Babylonia. Merchants from Assur traveled far and wide, establishing trading colonies in distant lands. One such colony, Kanesh in central Anatolia, has provided us with thousands of cuneiform tablets that offer a glimpse into the bustling commercial life of the time. These early Assyrians were not yet the feared conquerors they would later become. Instead, they were primarily traders and craftsmen, known for their metalwork and textiles. They worshipped a pantheon of gods inherited from earlier Mesopotamian traditions, with their city god Assur at the head. As we walk through the streets of this ancient city in our mind's eye, we can imagine the sights and sounds that would have greeted us. The air would have been filled with the clamor of the marketplace, the bleating of sheep being led to sacrifice, the rhythmic chanting of priests in the temples. The city's mud-brick houses would have been crowded together, their flat roofs providing extra living space in the hot summers. At the heart of the city stood the Temple of Assur, rising above the surrounding buildings. This was not just a place of worship, but the administrative center of the city. The god Assur was believed to be the true king of the city, with the human ruler serving as his earthly representative. But Assur was not alone in this world. To the south lay the powerful city-states of Babylonia, heirs to the Sumerian civilization. To the northwest was the land of Mitanni, a kingdom of chariot-riding warriors. And beyond them, the Hittite Empire in Anatolia was beginning to flex its muscles. For centuries, Assur existed in the shadow of these greater powers. Sometimes independent, sometimes under the sway of foreign rulers, the city endured. Little did anyone know that from this humble beginning would rise an empire that would one day dominate the entire Near East. As we leave this early period of Assyrian history, we can already see the seeds of their future greatness. The commercial acumen of their merchants, the devotion to their god Assur, and their strategic location at the crossroads of important trade routes. All these factors would play crucial roles in the rise of Assyrian power. But the road to empire would be long and fraught with challenges. Into the second millennium BC, we see the first stirrings of Assyrian imperial ambition. The catalyst for this change was a ruler named Shamshi-Adad I, who seized the throne of Assur around 1808 BC. Unlike previous rulers who had been content with controlling the city and its immediate surroundings, Shamshi-Adad had grander aspirations. Through a combination of military conquest and diplomatic maneuvering, Shamshi-Adad created a large kingdom that stretched from the Zagros Mountains in the east to the Euphrates River in the west. He established his sons as rulers of key cities, creating a network of family-controlled territories. This was the first time Assyria had expanded beyond its traditional heartland, and it set a precedent for future rulers. However, Shamshi-Adad's empire was short-lived. After his death, it quickly fragmented under pressure from neighboring powers, particularly Babylon under its famous king, Hammurabi. For the next several centuries, Assyria would experience periods of independence interspersed with times of foreign domination. One of the most significant of these foreign powers was the Kingdom of Mitanni, which controlled much of northern Mesopotamia in the 15th and 14th centuries BC. The Mitanni, with their mastery of chariot warfare, were able to subjugate Assyria for a time. But this period of subordination had an unexpected benefit for the Assyrians. It exposed them to advanced military technologies and tactics that they would later use to great effect. The turning point came in the 14th century BC, under the rule of Ashur-uballit I. Taking advantage of the weakening of Mitanni power, Ashur-uballit declared Assyrian independence and began to expand Assyrian territory. He also took the unprecedented step of corresponding as an equal with the great powers of the day, including Egypt and Babylon. This marks the beginning of Assyria's emergence as a major player on the international stage. Ashur-uballit's successors continued this policy of expansion. Kings like Adad-nirari I and Shalmaneser I pushed Assyrian borders further, conquering the remnants of Mitanni and coming into conflict with the Hittite Empire to the west and Babylon to the south. By the end of the 13th century BC, Assyria had become one of the great powers of the Near East. This period, known as the Middle Assyrian period, saw significant developments in Assyrian society and culture. The kings began to adopt more grandiose titles, reflecting their growing power. Adad-nirari I, for instance, styled himself King of the Universe, King of Assyria, Strong King, King of all the four quarters of the world. The Assyrian state also became more centralized and bureaucratic during this time. A complex system of provincial administration was developed, with governors appointed by the king to oversee different regions of the empire. This system would later be expanded and refined, becoming one of the key factors in Assyria's imperial success. In terms of culture, the Middle Assyrian period saw the codification of many aspects of Assyrian law and society. The so-called Middle Assyrian laws, dating from this time, provide insight into Assyrian social structure and values. They reveal a patriarchal society with strict hierarchies, where the rights and responsibilities of individuals were clearly defined based on their social status. However, Just as Assyria seemed poised to become the dominant power in the Near East, a series of crises struck. The end of the Bronze Age, around 1200 BC, brought widespread disruption to the entire region. Sea peoples ravaged the coastal areas, empires collapsed, and trade networks were disrupted. Assyria, while not directly invaded, was not immune to these changes. For nearly 2 centuries, Assyrian power contracted. The empire shrank back to its core territory around Assur, and for a time, it seemed that Assyria might fade into obscurity like so many other once great powers of the Bronze Age. But the Assyrians were resilient. They weathered the storm of the Bronze Age collapse better than many of their neighbors, preserving key aspects of their culture and political organization. Now this period of retrenchment set the stage for Assyria's most spectacular phase of expansion and the birth of what we now call the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Into the first millennium BC, we witnessed the dawn of Assyria's greatest era, the Neo-Assyrian period. This is the time when Assyria would transform from a regional power into a true empire, dominating the Near East in a way no previous state had managed. The resurgence began under Adad-nirari II, 911 to 891 BC, who reasserted Assyrian control over its traditional territories and began pushing into new areas. But it was under his successors, particularly Ashurnasirpal II, 883 to 859 BC, and Shalmaneser III RD, 858 to 824 BC, that Assyria truly began to flex its imperial muscles. Ashurnasirpal II is often considered the first great king of the Neo-Assyrian period. He was a tireless campaigner, leading his armies on annual expeditions to expand and consolidate Assyrian territory. But he was also a great builder. He moved the capital from Assur to the city of Kalhu, modern Nimrud, where he constructed a magnificent palace decorated with stunning reliefs depicting his military victories and royal hunts. These reliefs, many of which can now be seen in museums around the world, provide us with invaluable insights into Assyrian art, culture, and military tactics. They show the king as a mighty warrior and hunter, emphasizing his role as the protector of his people and the chosen of the gods. Ashurnasirpal's son, Shalmaneser III, continued his father's policies of expansion. He campaigned widely, reaching as far as the Mediterranean coast and coming into conflict with a coalition of Syrian and Palestinian states. It was during one of these campaigns that Shalmaneser encountered and defeated a force that included Ahab the Israelite, one of the earliest mentions of Israel in non-biblical sources. The Assyrian war machine that Ashurnasirpal and Shalmaneser unleashed on the world was a fearsome thing. At its core were the king's personal troops, well-trained and equipped professional soldiers. These were supplemented by levies from across the empire. The Assyrian army was noted for its use of cavalry and chariots, as well as its siege engines, which could reduce even the strongest fortifications to rubble. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of Assyrian warfare was its psychological impact. The Assyrians cultivated a reputation for brutality, often employing terror tactics to subdue their enemies. Ashurnasirpal II, for instance, boasted in one inscription, "I flayed as many nobles as had rebelled against me and draped their skins over the pile of corpses. Some I spread out within the pile, some I erected on stakes upon the pile. I flayed many right through my land and draped their skins over the walls." While such accounts were likely exaggerated for propagandistic purposes, they nonetheless reflect the Assyrians' use of fear as a tool of empire. The Assyrian imperial system was not just about conquest, however. The Neo-Assyrian kings developed a sophisticated system of provincial administration to govern their vast territories. Conquered areas were either turned into provinces ruled directly by Assyrian governors, or left as vassal states under local rulers who paid tribute to Assyria. This system was supported by an extensive network of roads and way stations that facilitated communication across the empire. Regular reports were sent from the provinces to the capital, keeping the king informed of developments throughout his realm. This level of centralized control was unprecedented in the ancient world and was a key factor in the longevity of Assyrian rule. The Neo-Assyrian period also saw significant developments in Assyrian culture and religion. The cult of Ashur remained central, but it was increasingly conflated with the worship of other major deities. The Assyrian kings presented themselves as the earthly representatives of the gods, chosen to bring order to the world through their conquests. This period saw a flourishing of Assyrian literature and learning. Libraries were established in major cities, collecting texts on everything from religious rituals to medical treatments. The most famous of these was the Library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh. Coming into the 8th and 7th centuries BC, we see Assyria at the peak of its power and influence. This period, often referred to as the Sargonid dynasty after its founder Sargon II, saw the Assyrian Empire reach its greatest territorial extent and achieve unprecedented levels of wealth and cultural sophistication. Sargon II, who came to the throne in 722 BC, was a usurper who sought to legitimize his rule through military conquest and grand building projects. He completed the conquest of the Kingdom of Israel, deporting much of its population in what would become a standard Assyrian practice. This event, recorded in the Bible, marks one of the most significant intersections between Assyrian history and the Judeo-Christian tradition. Sargon also founded a new capital city, Dur-Sharrukin, modern Khorsabad, which was designed to showcase the power and wealth of the Assyrian Empire. The city was built on a massive scale, with a royal palace decorated with miles of stone reliefs depicting Sargon's victories and the tribute brought to him from across the empire. Sargon's son and successor, Sennacherib, 705 to 681 BC, is perhaps best known for his military campaign against Judah, which is recorded in the Bible. He also moved the capital of Assyria to Nineveh, transforming it into one of the largest and most magnificent cities of the ancient world. Sennacherib's Nineveh was a marvel of urban planning and engineering. He expanded the city to cover an area of about 7 square kilometers, surrounded by massive walls stretching for 12 kilometers. The city boasted wide streets, impressive public buildings, and an extensive system of aqueducts and canals that brought water from the surrounding hills. The crowning glory of Nineveh was Sennacherib's palace without a rival. This enormous complex, covering an area of about 8 hectares, was decorated with intricate stone reliefs depicting the king's military campaigns and building projects. One of the most famous of these reliefs shows the Siege of Lachish, a fortified city in Judah, providing us with a vivid illustration of Assyrian siege warfare. Sennacherib's reign also saw advancements in technology and engineering. He is credited with developing new techniques for casting large bronze sculptures and improving irrigation systems throughout the empire. His engineers even created what some consider to be the world's first aqueduct, bringing water from springs in the hills to Nineveh over a distance of 50 kilometers. The reign of Esarhaddon, 680 to 669 BC, Sennacherib's son and successor, marked another high point for the Assyrian Empire. Esarhaddon managed to accomplish what no Mesopotamian ruler before him had achieved, the conquest of Egypt. This momentous victory extended Assyrian control from the Nile to the Persian Gulf, creating an empire of unprecedented size and diversity. Esarhaddon's conquest of Egypt is celebrated in several inscriptions, including this one found on a stele from Samal, modern Zinkerli. I fought with Tarku, king of Egypt and Ethiopia, the one accursed by all the great gods. 5 times I hit him with the point of my arrows, inflicting wounds from which he should not recover, and then I laid siege to Memphis, his royal city, and conquered it in half a day by means of mines, breaches, and assault ladders. I destroyed it, tore down its walls, and burned it with fire. However, Holding on to Egypt proved challenging, and it was left to Esarhaddon's son and successor, Ashurbanipal, 668 to 627 BC, to complete the conquest and establish firm Assyrian control over the land of the pharaohs. Ashurbanipal is often considered the last great Assyrian king, and his reign represents both the pinnacle of Assyrian power and the beginning of its decline. Unlike many of his predecessors, Ashurbanipal was known not just for his military prowess, but also for his scholarly pursuits. Ashurbanipal was proud of his literacy and learning, boasting in one inscription, "I, Ashurbanipal, within the palace, learned the wisdom of Nabu, the god of writing, the whole of the scribal art of every kind. I made myself the master of them all." This was no idle boast. Ashurbanipal assembled one of the greatest libraries of the ancient world in his palace at Nineveh. This library, rediscovered by archaeologists in the 19th century, contained over 30,000 clay tablets covering a vast range of subjects. From epic poetry and historical chronicles to scientific treatises on medicine, mathematics, and astronomy. The Library of Ashurbanipal provides us with much of what we know about Mesopotamian literature and science. It included texts like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation myth, and numerous royal inscriptions and letters. The library also contained bilingual texts that have helped modern scholars decipher ancient languages. Ashurbanipal's reign saw Assyrian art and architecture reach new heights of sophistication. The reliefs from his palace at Nineveh are considered some of the finest examples of Assyrian art. They show a level of naturalism and attention to detail unprecedented in earlier periods, particularly in the depiction of animals. The famous Dying Lioness relief, showing a lioness pierced by arrows during a royal hunt, is a masterpiece of ancient art. However, Ashurbanipal's reign also saw the beginnings of the empire's decline. The cost of maintaining such a vast empire, stretching from Egypt to Iran, was enormous. Constant rebellions in far-flung provinces drained the empire's resources and manpower. Moreover, new powers were rising on the empire's borders. To the east, the Medes were becoming increasingly powerful. To the south, Babylon was growing restless under Assyrian rule. And in the west, Egypt managed to throw off Assyrian control and reassert its independence under the 26th dynasty. The decline of the Assyrian Empire was as swift as it was unexpected. In the span of just a few decades, this mighty empire, which had dominated the Near East for centuries, collapsed into dust. The process began shortly after the death of Ashurbanipal in 627 BC. The exact circumstances of his passing and the succession are unclear, but it seems that a period of internal strife followed. This weakness at the center of the empire provided an opportunity for its enemies. In 626 BC, a Chaldean leader named Nabopolassar seized control of Babylon and declared independence from Assyria. This rebellion coincided with invasions by the Medes from the east and Scythians from the north. The Assyrians, weakened by internal strife and the costs of maintaining their vast empire, were unable to effectively respond to these multiple threats. In 614 BC, the Medes captured and destroyed Ashur, the spiritual heart of the Assyrian Empire. This was a devastating blow, both practically and symbolically. 2 years later, in 612 BC, a coalition of Babylonians, Medes, and Scythians laid siege to Nineveh itself. The fall of Nineveh was a catastrophic event, vividly described in ancient sources. The Babylonian Chronicle, a contemporary account, describes it thus: the king of Akkad, Babylon, and his army, which had gone to help the Medes, did not reach the assault. The great city of Nineveh was captured. A great defeat was inflicted on its people. On that day, Sinsharishkun, king of Assyria, fled to the mountains. The king of Akkad and his entire army entered the city of Nineveh. From the month of Sivan until the month of Ab, for 3 months, they subjected the city to a heavy defeat. They carried off the vast booty of the city and the temple and turned the city into a ruin heap. The destruction of Nineveh marked the effective end of the Assyrian Empire. A remnant Assyrian state, led by Ashurbanipal II, held out at Haran for a few more years, but it also fell in 609 BC. The fall of Assyria had profound consequences for the region. The power vacuum left by the collapse of the empire was quickly filled by the Neo-Babylonian Empire under Nebuchadnezzar II. The political map of the Near East was redrawn, setting the stage for the later rise of the Persian Empire. Despite its violent end, the legacy of Assyria endured. The Assyrians had created one of the world's first true empires, developing administrative and military techniques that would influence later imperial powers. Their cultural achievements, particularly in art and literature, continued to resonate long after the fall of their cities. The rediscovery of Assyrian cities in the 19th century CE sparked a wave of interest in ancient Mesopotamia. The spectacular palace reliefs, colossal statues, and cuneiform tablets unearthed by archaeologists provided new insights into this ancient civilization and helped to bring the world of the Old Testament to life. Today, the legacy of ancient Assyria lives on in museums around the world, where visitors can marvel at the artistic achievements of this remarkable civilization. It also lives on in the modern Assyrian people, descendants of the ancient empire who have maintained their distinct cultural identity despite centuries of persecution and displacement. The story of Assyria serves as a powerful reminder of the rise and fall of empires, the enduring impact of cultural achievements, and the complex interplay of power, religion, and society in shaping human history.